Namaste, Harbol. My name is Janapati Das, and this is the Bhagavad Gita as it is class. Today we will be reading from the beginning of chapter 4 with the purports by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So please accept my respects and humble obeisances. Thank you for tuning in and taking your time, your precious time, to listen to the transcendental sound vibrations of the Bhagavad Gita and of Kirtan, the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita. Excuse me. I'd like to take a moment to offer my most humble obeisances unto Jagaguru Siddhaswarupananda Paramahamsa Srila Prabhupada, my life and my soul and my heart, and to my dear spiritual grandfather, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Thank you so much for translating and purporting upon this wonderful Bhagavad Gita as it is. And I would like to humbly offer my kirtan, the chanting of Krishna's names. I'm not particularly qualified to transmit other than the mercy upon me from my spiritual master and my spiritual grandfather. So I offer my head at their lotus feet, and hope that I may be able to impart the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita unto you. Thank you. So please join along in the kirtan, the chanting, the hearing and repeating of Krishna's holy names. Haribo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Okay, so last time we had read through completely chapter 4 in the Bhagavad Gita. We are progressing further. We had gone through massing the armies at the battlefield, observing the armies at the battlefield, the Kurukshetra, the contents of the Gita summarized in chapter 2, and Karma Yoga in chapter 3. And now we are continuing on to transcendental knowledge in chapter 4. Exciting. Always very exciting. Text 1. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Imam Vivashvate Yogam Proktavan Maham Avyayam Vivishvan Manave Praha Manurikshvake Bravit. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, Imam, this, Vivashvate, unto the Sun God, Yogam, the science of one's relationship to the Supreme, Proktavam, instructed, Aham, I, Avyayam, imperishable, Vivishvan, the Sun God's name, Manave, unto the Father of mankind, unto the name Vaishvashvata. Praha, told, Mano, the Father of mankind, Ikshvakyabe, unto Ikshvaku. Bravit, said. Translation. The Blessed Lord said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivishvan, and Vivishvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. So the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God, is the instructions of Bhakti Yoga as it's unfolding, as Krishna is instructing it. Krishna is instructing the 3 phases of God realization, of work done in devotion, of the 3 steps of self-realization, including the essence of the living entity as being spiritual and not material, and that the purpose for what we should be doing. And here in chapter 4, in the transcendental knowledge, this imperishable science of yoga, right? The science of yoga. For once, it's imperishable. It's knowledge. The knowledge of, general materialistic knowledge is perishable because it is a material element. It's a material science or knowledge that is created, that has fallacy, and that will eventually be perishing because it may be very long, but because of its faultiness and because of where it's originating from, really, it will not continue. But the imperishable science of our relationship to Krishna, it doesn't matter whether there are no living entities carrying on this knowledge. The knowledge is non-different than Krishna, so therefore it's a science. Science comes from the root word theos, which means truth, and yoga, which means the relationship of loving relationship, to connect, to the living entity and the supreme soul in a loving relationship. So here Krishna is explaining that as the source of the imperishable science of yoga, as it being non-different, he instructs this. There is a disciplic lineage that was started by the Supreme Lord, and that was told originally to the sun god Vivishwan, and Vivishwan realized this information, applied it in his life, and as a spiritual master handed it down to Manu, the original progenitor, the father of mankind, and the Manu, of course, handed it down to his son Ikshvaku. And there's in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, there is I think after the instruction and introduction, there are actually three main lineages of this absolute truth, and this one, it says, we'll get into it more, but we can tell that absolute truth, real knowledge, is handed down in a descending process. In other words, a perfect disciple will receive, or a disciple doesn't have to be perfect, or a student will receive the information, try to apply it in their life, and on realizing it, will be able to hand it down thoroughly. And this is the way that information is handed down. So this is the way that the transcendental knowledge is handed down, and we'll get to more about that in the next verse. Purport by His Divine Grace. Herein we find the history of the Bhagavad Gita traced from a remote time when it was delivered to the royal order, the kings of all planets. This science is especially meant for the protection of the inhabitants, and therefore the royal order should understand it in order to be able to rule the citizens and protect them from the material bondage to lust. So, not our leaders nowadays are not really doing anything but furthering our entanglement into the material world, if that at all, So traditionally, the Kshatriyas were receiving the information. They received the information from their spiritually to apply to the people and to be able to rule the people. They received all spiritual knowledge, and they were teaching it to the people. Human life is meant for cultivation of spiritual knowledge. That's just the end game right there. What is human life about? What is it about? Human life is only one purpose, really, and that is the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, an eternal relationship to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the executive heads of all states and all planets are obliged to impart this lesson to the citizens by education, culture, and devotion. So the people are not doing this. But if they did, then we'd have a peaceful society. We wouldn't be fighting. We wouldn't be deliberating whether Jimmy Kimmel should be fired or not be fired, whether Donald Trump is a great president or whether Donald Trump is a terrible president, whether, this or that. It doesn't really matter, because it's complete ignorance to be even engaging in so much nonsense. In other words, the executive heads of all states are intended to spread the science of Christian consciousness so that the people may take advantage of this great science and pursue a successful path utilizing the opportunity of the human form of life. So Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada and a lot of great spiritual masters would not hesitate to try to educate the leaders and the presidents. Even Bhaktivedanta would send the Bhagavad Gita, would send letters to Gandhi and other presidents and whatnot, to remind them of what the purpose of, to not get caught up into this sort of materialistic, secular hedonism that we are perpetuating, but to be teaching the science of Krishna consciousness to people. But in this millennium, the sun god is known as Vivishwan, the king of the sun, which is the origin of all planets within the solar system. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated, Yachak Shur Esha Savita Strakala Grahanam Raja Samashta Sura Murtir Ashesha Tejaha Yashyai Ganaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govinda Mari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Let me worship, Lord Brahma says, the supreme personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who is the original person, and under whose order the sun, which is the king of all planets, is assuming immense power and heat. The sun represents the eye of the Lord and traverses its orbit in obedience to his order. The sun is the king of the planets, and the sun god, at present of the name Vivishvan, rules the sun planet, which is controlling all other planets by supplying heat and light. He is rotating under the order of Krishna, and Lord Krishna originally made Vivishvan his first disciple to understand the science of Bhagavad Gita. The Gita is not, therefore, a speculative treatise for an insignificant mundane scholar, but is a standard book of knowledge coming down from time immemorial. So not only is the Bhagavad Gita not just a book for the mundane scholar, but it's a standard book of knowledge coming from time immemorial. So too, we are especially in the age of Kali, unable to see, even with our material eyes, the things that go on in this universe. For example, the sun we think of as a star, a ball of helium and hydrogen gases, but we do not see that it is actually the king of all planets, that it is the eye of Krishna. It is a heavenly planet, actually, of great, with a king and residents that we do not actually see because of our, we only have some mud eyes and water and a little bit of fire and we have these elements and these things, but we cannot actually see what is really going on. We are completely ignorant. In the Mahabharata, Santi Parva 348, I guess that's chapter, verse 51 to 52. Oh yeah, those are chapters, they are shlokas, verses 51 shlokas. We can trace out the history of the Gita as follows. Treta Yuga Dao Cha Tato Vivishvan Manave Dadao Manush Cha Loka Briti Artam Suta Yekshva Kave Dadao Ishva Kuna Cha Katito Vyapa Lokan Avashtitaha. In the beginning of the Treta Yuga millennium, the science of the relationship with the Supreme was delivered by Vivishvan to Manu. Manu, being the father of mankind, gave it to his son Maharaj Ishvaku, the king of the earth planet, and forefather of the Raghu dynasty in which Lord Ramachandra appeared. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita existed in the human society from the time of Maharaj Ishvaku. So there are different yugas or spans of time in the cycle of creation, right? We have the Satya Yuga, when it's very beautiful and wonderful, and then there's an age after that follows Treta Yuga, and then Dwapara Yuga, and then Kali Yuga, and each age gets more and more degraded until Kali Yuga consists in basically 432,000 years, and we're only somewhere like a little over 5,000 years, and we're watching it descend into the muck, but it will get really, really bad. But the very wonderful thing is that Lord Chaitanya's movement will grow in the first 10,000 years of Kali Yuga, or since the appearance of Lord Chaitanya. In the beginning of the Treta Yuga, oh, I already read that part, okay. At the present moment, we have just passed through 5,000 years of the Kali Yuga, which lasts 432,000 years. So science doesn't really have things correctly. They keep they're like, oh, well, we think this because we've found this bone and we've dated it to, through this faulty carbon dating process that it's humankind started 25,000 years ago, but then they keep finding bones that are older and older, and they're actually, so they have this whole theory about like cavemen and Neanderthals and whatnot, and their theory keeps getting shifting, but they're still trying to hold on to it because they keep finding new and new evidence that shows that people have actually been around much longer. And this shows in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Vedic system, we know a much larger cosmology and science about cycles of time, multi universes, which they got the multiverse theory now. They're finally coming around and kind of, well, actually maybe there are parallel universes with multiple dimensions, which they have studied with the theory of string theory, and physics just keeps getting weirder and weirder, and so that just keeps shifting, the idea of what the reality is. But in the Vedic system, in these systems of religious thought and scripture, they already know. So India already knew. They know so much more that science is just scratching the surface on now, or Western science. Before this was Dwapara Yuga, 800,000 years, and before that there was Treta Yuga, 1,200,000 years, and thus some 2,005,000 years ago, Manu spoke the Bhagavad Gita to his disciple and son Maharaj Ishvaku, the king of this planet Earth. So millions of years ago, when we think there was like dinosaurs or whatever, or that the Earth is just kind of like moving around billions of years. No, people have been around. Civilizations have existed. Cycles of time have come and gone. And it's really mind-blowing when you get into the Vedic science of how, in the cosmology of things. It's really, really deep. And the Srimad Bhagavatam also has explanations about multi-universes, multi-dimensions within universes, and et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty wild. But the main point is that this spiritual knowledge has been circulating through different universes and since time immemorial, accepting that before the birth, the age of the current Manu is calculated, the age of the current Manu is calculated to last some 305,300,000 years, of which 120,400,000 have passed. So there's a father of mankind that is like, the progenitor of Manu. That's the first man. And this happens, there's different Manus. So it gets really wild, I'm telling you. Accepting that before the birth of Manu, the Gita was spoken by the Lord to his disciple, the sun god Vivishvana. A rough estimate is that the Gita was spoken at least 120,400,000 years ago. So the Bhagavad Gita is eternal. It's an eternal scientific treatise, spiritual knowledge that is handed down by spiritual master to teacher, and we have the Bhagavad Gita with the story on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, but the Bhagavad Gita is eternal. It's not like it just happened this one time with Arjuna and Krishna. But we have this to rely on. Accepting that before the birth of Manu, the Gita was spoken to his disciple, the sun god Vivishvana. A rough estimate is that the Gita was spoken at least 120,400,000 years ago, and in human society it has been extant for 2 million years. It was spoken by the Lord again to Arjuna about 5,000 years ago. That is a rough estimate of the history of the Gita. According to the Gita itself, and according to the version of the speaker, Lord Sri Krishna, it was spoken to the sun god Vivishvan because he is also Kshatriya, and is the father of all Kshatriyas who are descendants of the sun god, or the Surya Vamsha Kshatriyas. Very interesting. Because this Bhagavad Gita is as good as the Vedas, being spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this knowledge is aparusheya, superhuman. Since the Vedic instructions are accepted as they are without a human interpretation, the Gita must therefore be accepted without mundane interpretation. So the way we run with the current science, so-called science, empirical science, empirical knowledge, is collected and decimated, is delineated through speculation and a gathering of data. But basically, this knowledge is faulty because the senses are imperfect, and we've discussed this before in the past. So we can't accept the scientific knowledge, and nor does any scientist really ultimately say that this is the absolute knowledge. They'll say, well, we know A, B, and C, and we don't know D, E, F all the way to Z, but one day we will gather all that information, we will know everything. And what they find is that A, B, and C, a lot of things, or D, we may have theories about it, or we think that it's this, and then they find they get a more powerful telescope, more powerful microscope. New scientists come along with different theories. They say this whole theory is not any good. So it's just like this, what is those things, like a treadmill. You just kind of going, just going the same way. You're not really getting anywhere. But the Vedic knowledge is the absolute truth. It's the absolute truth. We take it as it is. And when people say, well, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is a God, prove it. And we're like, how do you prove it with what? Well, with science, with empirical science. But the problem is you're giving me a broken system to try to apply and understand the absolute truth, which is perfect in knowledge, perfect, complete in itself, as the Sri Ishopanishad said, completely perfect as a unit. The knowledge is complete. It doesn't need to be proven. The only way you prove it is reading it and understanding it and hearing it from the pure devotee of God, of Krishna. That is the absolute truth. We use empirical science to support our arguments. We have to use language. We have language. We have abstractions and math and the science that it's not that we're just like, oh well, that doesn't apply to anything. But we understand. We're not fools to think that we can actually take a small shot glass and say we're going to scoop up the ocean and understand this with this shot glass. That's just ridiculous. And so the reality is, when atheists make this argument, it's because they don't want to accept God. They're envious of God. They're jealous of God. They think they're God themselves, and therefore their knowledge is absolute truth to them. And they just mock you. But whatever. The mundane wranglers. Okay. The mundane wranglers may speculate on the Gita in their own ways, but that is not Bhagavad Gita as it is. So there's plenty of people who are these so-called atheists, these speculators. They're proud of their knowledge and their ability to master Sanskrit, but they have no entrance into the Bhagavad Gita, so they want to interpret it from their own point of view as Krishna, as their own Krishna. So they may speculate on the Gita, but we do not accept that. It is not accepted even by the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita has to be accepted as it is, which is why Bhaktivedanta entitled this Bhagavad Gita as it is. He received the information from his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati received the information from Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. Gaur Kishore Das Babaji received the information from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and so on, so on. And this is all shown at the disciplic lineage. And Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada gave it to my dear spiritual master, Jagadguru Siddhaswarapananda Paramahamsa. And he gave it to me and to all my god brothers and god sisters likewise. So, and we are sharing it with you. So, this is how this works. We hand down the perfect mango to receive. You can take it as you want, but you can't just like chop it up and say, okay, I'm going to add mud to it and then I'll have a perfect mango, or I'm going to add grass and maybe a strawberry and a watermelon and call it a mango. You can't just put your own speculations about these things on there. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita has to be accepted as it is from the disciplic succession, and it is described herein that the Lord spoke to the sun god spoke to his son Manu, and Manu spoke to his son Ishvaku. So this is a very powerful idea that spiritual knowledge, absolute truth, is disseminated and delineated in disciplic lineage of pure spiritual masters to perfect disciples. Text 2. Evam param para praptam imam rajashayo vidu sach kalenya mahata yoga nashtaha parantapa. Evam, thus, parampara, disciplic succession, very important word. Praptam, received, imam, this science, Rajashaya, the saintly kings, Viduhu, understood, Saha, that knowledge, Kalena, in the course of time, Iha, in this world, Mahata, by great, Yogaha, the science of one's relationship with the Supreme, Nashtaha, scattered, Parantapa, O Arjuna, subduer of the enemies. So, this word parampara refers to a handing down, right? One after the other, a disciplic lineage. And so the disciplic lineage that I am in is called the Gaudiya Sampradaya, Brahma Sampradaya. And I'm going to I'll just read this lineage, which is here in the Bhagavad Gita as it is, and you can see it, but we will read it again. Evam parampara praptim imam rajashaya vidu. So what we just read, Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, verse 2. This Bhagavad Gita as it is, received through this disciplic succession. Krishna, Brahma, Narada, Vyasa, Madhava, Padmanabha, Nirhari, Madhava. These are all the spiritual masters to their disciples, and the disciples become spiritual masters. Akshokvaya, Jayatirtha, Gyanashindu, Daya Nidhi, Vidya Nidhi, Rajendra, Jaya Dharma, Purushatam, Brahma Yatirtha, Vyashatirtha, Lakshmipati, Madhavendra Puri, Ishvara Puri, Nityananda Advaita, Lord Chaitanya, Rupa, so Arup Sanatan, Raghunatha Jiva, Krishna Das Kaviraj, of course, who wrote the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Narottam Vishwanatha, Baladev Jagannath, Bhakti Vinod, Gaura Kishore, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Jagadguru Siddhaswarapananda Paramahamsa, Srila Prabhupada. There it is. So the knowledge is not speculated, it's not changed, it's not altered in any way. The mango is the mango. Things may be presented a little different depending on time and circumstance. Things that you use as analogies might change. Cars may have once been horses. Computers may have been, marketplaces of communication or whatever. So, text 2. The supreme science was thus received through a chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it appears to be lost. So this information is handed down as a supreme science. So it's not, religious or fanaticism or just, the feelies or whatever. It's an actual science. It's solid as a rock. It's perfect and complete. It is the absolute truth. It is non-different than Krishna. It is a supreme science, so it is the absolute truth. And it's received through a chain of disciplic succession. So a lot of times, you may see people in different kinds of so-called faiths or, religious preachers, self-proclaimed preachers, and you ask them, who's your spiritual master? And they say, Jesus Christ. I'm like, well, who's your living spiritual master? And they're like, well, we don't have one, we don't need one, but we can give you the absolute truth because I've surrendered to Jesus. It's like, a lot of people so-called surrender to Jesus. I'm not saying it's bad to surrender to Jesus. I think Jesus Christ is the Vaishnava spiritual master. I surrendered to Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ is my spiritual master also. But he's not my living spiritual master. He's no longer on the planet, And it's easy for people to say that I've surrendered to Jesus, and you get these people, they're like, Jesus told me to go blow up this other church, or Jesus told me to shoot these people. God told me to do this, and I'm hearing this, So it's very difficult to hear the difference between what's going on in your mind and what maybe Jesus Christ or the Lord in your heart is actually telling you, which is why we have a three-pronged system: the scripture, the guru, the living guru, and the Lord in the heart, right? So we need these things because we need the living spiritual master to actually tell us, no, when we think something, is it true? Can we support it by scripture? Can we support it by the guru? And can we support it by what we're hearing in the Lord in our heart? So those three, things Christian faith has, scripture and the Lord in your heart, or the Holy Spirit, but they don't know how to properly interpret this scripture. Same thing with Islamic. A lot of these religions don't have a spiritual lineage. I mean, they may have had the prophet who received the scripture or received the message, but they didn't hand down. They didn't have a solid line that was broken. And the only reason why this supposedly broken spiritual line of absolute truth is because Krishna is the supreme source. He's the supreme absolute truth, so he can reinstate the lineage of spiritual knowledge because he is the source of the spiritual knowledge. It is clearly stated that the Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. Certainly, Bhagavad Gita was never meant for the demoniac persons who would dissipate its value for one's benefit and would devise all types of interpretations according to personal whims. So, basically saying the translators are not trying to pass on the message of the Bhagavad Gita, what's in the Bhagavad Gita, but they're interpreting from their own point of view they're not in a disciplic lineage, so they may want to have their own kind of interpretation about things for a particular reason. As soon as the original purpose was scattered by the motives of the unscrupulous commentators, there arose the need to reestablish the disciplic succession. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore he declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. In the same way, at the present moment, there are so many editions of the Gita, especially in English, but almost all of them are not according to authorized disciplic succession. There are innumerable interpretations rendered by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Sri Krishna. They sell their books, right? And they'll say, oh, Krishna was an important historical figure. Krishna was a representative of the unmanifest within all of us, or, he was a myth representing our own psyche and blah, 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 and so many things like that. And they sell their books, and you go to Barnes and Nobles and see all this nonsense, bullshit Bhagavad Gita translations that are just, you might as well just wipe your ass with them. Sorry, I don't mean to be crude, but that's basically taking something so beautiful as the Bhagavad Gita and interpreting it accordingly for your own, in the craziest interpretations, and demoniac. This is, as Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada says, these people are demoniac. They're using the sacred and making it profane. Spirit is demoniac because demons do not believe in God, but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme. Since there is a great need of an edition of the Gita in English, as it is received by the Parampara disciplic succession system, an attempt is made herewith to fulfill this great want. So they do this all the time. They've done it with Hatha Yoga, and what yoga was a great, a branch of the spiritual pursuit. It was so that you could calm your mind, calm your body, control your desires, focus your mind, bring health to the body so that you can go through the steps of the Ashtanga system. But what has yoga become now? It's all kinds of yoga. They got beer yoga, they do Kundalini yoga, and they got the Kama Sutra yoga, and people just do it to have great sex and just be hedonistic. And so they basically have, these are demons. And when you get Christians who look at that, they're right in saying it's satanic, because it is really satanic. It's demoniac. And it's understandable that they're looking at these false so-called yogis and just seeing them as satanic, because they don't really know what yoga was really there to try to understand our relationship, help come to the point of our reinstating our loving relationship with Krishna. Since there is a great need of an edition in Gita in English as it is received by the Parampara disciplic succession, an attempt is made herewith to fulfill this great want. This is what Bhaktivedanta did, this great thing for us. Bhagavad Gita, accepted as it is a great boon to humanity, but if it is accepted as a treatise of philosophical speculations, it is simply a waste of time. So we're not here to just well, you know this, you know that. You can't know the absolute truth by speculating philosophically or scientifically. This is not what the Gita is about. This is not what Vedic knowledge is about. It's not how we receive knowledge. Text 3. Sa evayam maya te dya yoga proktaha puratanaha bhaktosi me shaka cheti laha shyam hidyetat uttamam. Saha, the same ancient, eva, certainly, ayam, this, maya, by me, te, unto you, adya, today, yogaha, the science of yoga, proktaha, spoken, puranatanaha, very old, bhaktaha, devotee, asi, you are, me, my, shaka, friend, cha, also, iti, therefore, rahashyam, mystery, like that word, rahashyam. He, certainly, etat, this, uttamam, transcendental. Translation, that very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told to me by you, to you, because you are my devotee as well as my friend. Shaka, friend, right? Therefore, you can understand the transcendental mystery of this science. Now, Krishna is telling Arjuna that this disciplic lineage, the information that he's relating to him, he is telling him because he's non-envious of Krishna as a friend, as a true friend, because Krishna is the ultimate friend. He's our best friend. He's our ever well-wisher. And the spiritual master, being a representative of Krishna, is also our best friend and ever well-wisher. The best friend you could ever have. Friends in this world are conditional. You know, they come with their own agendas and whatnot. But Krishna has no agenda. And Krishna loves everyone. And he is a well-wisher and best friend of the living entity, as the bird who sits on the branch waiting for the other bird to stop eating the shit of the material world and to have that loving relationship, which is so this is a really powerful verse in understanding that one cannot actually understand the absolute truth by one's speculation and one's own ability to try to know. They can't climb the mountain of knowledge. They have to receive the knowledge in a humble state of mind, feeling oneself to be more tolerant, lower than the straw in the street. A very humble and receiving information, and not being envious of the devotee of Krishna or of Krishna. One can receive that information, can understand that information. They can understand it, which is normally a great mystery to people, because you can tell them that, and if they're envious of the spiritual master, if they're envious of Krishna, if they think they're Krishna, then they won't understand it. They won't comprehend it. And this has been seen time and time again. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada used to talk to the most intelligent, so-called intelligent people, scientists, philosophers, leaders, who are, by material standard, the most intelligent people on the planet. But because they were envious, the very simple and simple idea of not being the body, they couldn't understand. What do you mean we're not the body? They just couldn't understand it. He would explain it very clear. So this is the way that we receive information, and the chanting of Krishna's names purifies our heart so that we can hear that, so that our humility will allow us to be humble in the first place, and allow us to understand the information. So this knowledge is not how we accumulate empirical knowledge. Now, somebody who's envious could read all these things, could gather all this information and say, well, I know what about Bhagavad Gita because this and this and that and that and that, and I read all these things, and completely not understand it, which is what the demoniac translators, they are very materially knowledgeable. They know how to write Sanskrit and translate Sanskrit, and they are history, but their cup is full. Like the story of the great professor whose cup was full, right? We've told that story before, where the spiritual master pours all the tea, and he keeps pouring it, and he's yelling, the cup is full, my cup is full. And the spiritual master is like, yes, your cup is full. That is the problem. So it is a problem. We cannot receive this, but Krishna is making it, I'm telling you, you are taking the lower position as my disciple. You are my friend. You're not envious. You've gone through your thing, and now you're presenting the questions. You're listening. You're receiving this information, and you are receiving it transcendentally, and you are being purified. There are two classes of men, namely the devotee and the demon. The Lord selected Arjuna as the recipient of this great science owing to his becoming the devotee of the Lord. But for the demon, it is not possible to understand this great mysterious science. There are a number of editions of this great book of knowledge, and some of them have commentaries by the devotees, and some of them have commentaries by the demons. Commentation commentation by the devotees is real, whereas that of the demons is useless. It's like chanting of Krishna's names. You can be chanting Hare Krishna, and if you're a demon, if you're envious of Krishna, that is an empty gesture. But the juice is in the transcendental loving relationship. So you could be saying the same word Hare Krishna, and you're envious, you're an impersonalist, you believe God, you are God, and that Maha Mantra has no power. Similar, you could be translating, and this information is hollow. It has no spiritual depth at all. Arjuna accepts Sri Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In any commentary on the Gita, following in the footsteps of Arjuna is real devotional service to the cause of this great science. The demoniac, however, concoct something about Krishna and mislead the public and general readers from the path of Krishna's instructions. One should try to follow the disciplic succession from Arjuna and thus be benefited. Wonderful. And we can read one more verse. Our text 4. Arjuna vacha param bhavato janma param janma vivishvataha katam etad vijaniyam tavam adau proktavan iti. Arjuna uvacha. Arjuna said, aparam, junior, bhavataha, your, janma, birth, param, superior, janma, birth, vivishvataha, the sun god, katam, how, etat, this, vijaniyam, shall I understand, tavam, you, adau, in the beginning, proktavan, instructed, iti, thus. Translation. Arjuna said, the sun god Vivishvana is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him? We're only going to get to this verse, so we'll have to hold off the question in the next one. But that is a really good question, because Arjuna is trying to hit home. They're going to hit home the point that the living entity is not only eternal, but Krishna is the supreme soul. He is the supreme soul, and he remembers what we don't remember. Arjuna is an accepted devotee of the Lord, so how could he not believe Krishna's word? The fact is that Arjuna is not inquiring for himself, but for those who do not believe in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or for the demons who do not like the idea that Krishna should be accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Arjuna is setting this up so that we can all be benefited. For them, only Arjuna inquires on this point as if he were himself not aware of the personality of Godhead or Krishna. As it will be evident from the 10th chapter, Arjuna knew perfectly well that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the fountainhead of everything and the last word in transcendence. Of course, Krishna also appeared as a son of Devaki on this earth. How Krishna remained the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, the eternal, original person, is very difficult for an ordinary man to understand. Because when you think of Krishna as just this, you have to kind of twist things around, because otherwise it just the more and more you get into the Bhagavad Gita, the more obvious it is that what the absolute truth is in the Bhagavad Gita. You can do a lot of twisting around and say, Krishna is he's a personality, but he's the impersonal force is speaking through him, or the same things that we've been talking about, the nonsense that people try to do mental gymnastics to do. But everything is very, very clear and right, straightforward in the Bhagavad Gita. How Krishna remained the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the eternal original person, is very difficult for an ordinary man to understand. Therefore, to clarify this point, Arjuna put the question before Krishna so that he himself could speak authoritatively. That Krishna is the supreme authority is accepted by the whole world, not only at present, but from time immemorial, and the demons alone reject him. So Arjuna will be a spiritual master he's got to be able to clarify this very clearly. Anyway, Since Krishna is the authority accepted by all, Arjuna put this question before him in order that Krishna would describe himself without being depicted by the demons who will always try to distort him in a way understandable to the demons and their followers, which is very demoniac already. You know, the demons, they'll use religious text and cherry pick things and try to translate things to basically devalue Christians or devalue people of religious faiths. They'll like, well, see what this says there and that says there, and you know, without really seeing the bigger picture. It is necessary that everyone, for his own interest, know the science of Krishna. Therefore, when Krishna himself speaks about himself, it is auspicious for all the worlds. To the demons, such explanations by Krishna himself may appear to be strange, because the demons always study Krishna from their own standpoint. That's the main point. Because they're atheists and they are humanists, or I guess you could say, communists. They really want to use things in religious text to say there's mythologies that represent the human this and that. And there is some element of that, but we don't deny the historical reality of Krishna, of Arjuna, of God. But those who are devotees heartily welcome the statement of Krishna when they are spoken by Krishna himself. The devotees will always worship such authoritative statements of Krishna because they are always eager to know more and more about him. Yes, true. You know, you can't help but falling in love with Krishna. Can't help falling in love with you. Krishna, the more you learn, the more you hear about them, the more you want to know. It's just like sweet. Wonderful. The atheists who consider Krishna an ordinary man may in this way come to know that Krishna is superhuman, that he is Satchidananda Vigraha, the eternal form of bliss and knowledge, that he is transcendental, and that he is above the domination of the modes of material nature and above the influence of time and space. A devotee of Krishna, like Arjuna, is undoubtedly above all any misunderstanding of the transcendental position of Krishna. Arjuna's putting this question before the Lord is simply an attempt by the devotee to defy the atheistic attitude of the persons who consider Krishna to be an ordinary human being subject to the modes of material nature. If they have any inkling of intelligence, they will come to the point of understanding Krishna. And that is all for today. We will pick up next time with the answer, what Krishna says. Sorry, ran out of time, so we will have to leave that as a cliffhanger. Haribol.